Hello and welcome to Setting the Stage. I'm Isaac Shaker, and this is episode 82, Tarot Ghosts, George and Fears and Fortunes. George runs a actual play podcast on YouTube called Fears and Fortunes that focuses on some ghosts that escape from a deck of tarot cards, and the actual play is sponsored by the Forgotten Adventures company that makes battle maps for RPGs and other like map assets and digital assets that you can use in your game. So after listening to this episode, you can check them out as well. Now let's get the ads out of the way and then get into the episode. I'm here today with George from the Fears and Fortunes podcast, or I guess YouTube show also. So hey George, how you doing?
Hi, how's it going? We also have another show, Defenders of Phandelver. And that's part of Forgotten Adventures.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Is that one based on the Mines of Phandelver adventure?
Yeah, the Lost Mines of Phandelver, but also Phandelver and Below, the sort of expansion to that gets all into body horror and mind flayers and stuff like that.
Okay, so you're actually just playing through those, or is this a more inspired by kind of thing for that one?
No, we're actually playing through. Forgotten Adventures has made all of the maps for that campaign, and they're available for free on their Foundry module. And so part of the, draw of the game is we're both telling the story accurately from the module, but also we're showing off all these amazing maps they made that have like interactive effects and all that stuff.
Yeah. That's a good segue. So, like, your professional life is with Forgotten Adventures, right?
Yeah, I've been doing marketing for a long time, and in the past few years, I joined with Forgotten Adventures. They needed some help marketing, and it's been like a dream come true. Yeah,
I can imagine having. There's so many marketing jobs where you're just jumping around, but having one that's solid must feel really good.
Yeah, that part's not so new. I was doing marketing for several tech hardware companies like Corsair or Cooler Master, but I got so absolutely bored of the tech hardware space. And basically the way I got into D&D was while working at Corsair. A colleague of mine introduced me to the game. That was like about 10, 12 years ago. And I started playing it, and it just consumed my life. And yeah, so now to be able to do my job and still at the same time play D&D and be all involved in D&D stuff, it's just the best.
Yeah. I can see why you'd like it. It is a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. So you started playing while you were working at Corsair. What was the transition there from like player to DM for you?
Yeah, it's kind of funny. There was another person in the office who, his name's Robert, and Robert's great, good friend. I hope he's doing well. But when it came to DMing, he wasn't that good at it. He was running a homebrew campaign. I think it was his first time, and it was kind of bumpy and everything like that. And it got to a point where I felt like I could do this, and I offered to run a one-shot, and that one-shot became a 3-shot, and that became, like we're going to do like 10 sessions, and that's it. And it was something by like session 6 or something like that. He gave me his DM shield, and he's like, "This is yours. We're not running my game anymore. This clearly it was very flattering." And yeah, he had a very interesting character in the campaign, so he was fun. He got to have fun being a player. And yeah, being a DM strangely is more comfortable to me than being a player. I have so much anxiety being a player.
Yeah, I feel like there's people that will DM because, the group needs it and not because they like it.
Yeah.
And then there's other people that just really enjoy it. I don't feel like I experienced like anxiety as a player. I just feel like sort of limited because as a DM, like you're almost always interacting or reacting to what the players are doing. You don't really have to wait for your turn as much.
Well, and that's not absolutely true. And as someone with like weapons grade ADHD, I definitely enjoy being a DM more because I'm constantly engaged. But at the same time, when I'm a player, I try really hard to be the player I want at my table, in so much that, like, I'm taking the story seriously, I'm invested in my character, but also the other players at the table. I try to do that. But the anxiety comes in that, you know, if I mess up as a DM and this NPC turns into a joke, or this NPC fails all their rolls and dies, there's no harm in that. That's fine. I can make a million NPCs until I get one that the party likes. But if I play a character as a player and the whole party thinks that this guy's a loser, or they think my character's annoying, well, I guess that's it. I guess I got to re-roll, and that feels so much more like failure to me. Which obviously I realize that's in my head. No GM has made me feel that way. That is just me freaking out, like, oh, but I only have one shot. If I mess it up, they'll just hate him. You know.
Well, aren't all anxieties mostly in your head, anyways?
Yeah, no, it's true.
Yeah, one of my players has mentioned that feeling before, so I have experience trying to work with those feelings externally.
Well, I am glad I am not alone then, because I've not heard many people say that, and yeah. But anyway, so being a DM, that's my sweet spot. That's what I love to do.
Mm-hmm. Quick little interlude to tell you that the player that was having issues with anxiety in my campaign is Trajan, a great friend of mine, and we covered that in episode 28, Orcish Rising Recap, where we broke down a campaign where he was the king and the main one in charge. So if you're interested in learning more about how that concept worked for my group, you can go listen to that episode after you finish listening to this one about George. So let's get back to George. Well, yeah. So your work with Forgotten Adventures feels like a natural extension of marketing within a tech company, and then, you know, tech and D&D, there's a decent amount of, like, nerd overlap.
Yeah.
And the campaign that you did, because you have, well, two of them now, but the Fears and Fortunes was the first one, I think.
Yep.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. How did the idea for that start?
That's a really good question. It started with a magic item that I saw while reading Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. It's called Lubba's Taroka of Souls. And the premise of it is, this is like a artifact item. When you give it to the players, they can use it to do Wheel and Woe and all these other little abilities. But the big thing about it is whenever you use the deck, there's a chance that one of the souls inside of the deck escapes. And when that soul escapes, you have to find, it's 1 in 14, and you have to find that soul and, you know, put it to rest, most likely. And there's more that goes into that, but that was the basis. I thought, like, man, that's a cool item. You could easily build a whole campaign around it. It reminded me of Jackie Chan Adventures, the cartoon, where it's like, you know, all of these spirits came out of this thing. We have to go and challenge them all. Gives you an easy MacGuffin. It gives you an excuse to really have a bunch of colorful, interesting villains. So that's where we started. And then some other ideas came into it. Like, I'm a huge fan of the Magnus Archives, which is a horror podcast. And so some of that flavor slipped into it. And I was also a huge fan of this old movie called 13 Ghosts. And so I kind of took some inspiration for that, how they portrayed these different ghosts and the mythos behind them. So putting that all together ended up coming up with this unique story. And we knew we wanted to do horror. And so it was just a matter of finding the right cast. And I think we hit it out of the park on that.
Yeah, it seemed like your cast was all really well-established people who had done prior actual plays. That's a pretty good group to get together. Yeah,
two of my friends, Yo Skylar Seymour and May LaFay, those are both people I played with, as was Arcane Adam, who was in the first season. And then I reached out to Daniel the DM and Howdy Love Darlin, aka Meadow. Howdy Love Darlin, I'd known them on TikTok, like I'd seen their stuff. And so I just reached out, cold reached out to them, sending a message like, hey, we're doing a campaign for Forgotten Adventures. We would be really interested to play with you. And that can go poorly so easily. You can have personality clashes. You can have just people aren't as, because, I'm seeing them doing TikToks that I think are good. Mm-hmm. That doesn't mean they're necessarily a good role player or a good TTRPG player, but instead, no, turns out I reached out to the two most talented people in the TTRPG space right now. So very lucky for that.
Yeah. And I've heard what other shows will do is they'll actually do their first 2 or 3 sessions to make sure there's a good vibe and then release those episodes later so that that they know that it's actually going to be a good long-term fit.
I had actually heard about Dimension 20 doing that, doing sort of a test game that wasn't canon to see hey, do the characters all fit? And so we did that. I do regret not recording it because I had a very basic story for this first practice session. It was just okay, here's a MacGuffin, here's a ghost you guys are going to fight. Let's see how this goes. And when we did it, they were so good with the role play. I was face palming I should have recorded this because, oh my God, that was so good. It didn't make sense. I didn't write the session to be part of the campaign. So I would have had to have wedged it in after our first episode because I want the first episode to be the origin story of this party and everything like that. But it was still so good. There was a moment when Meadow's character, they had defeated these goblins, and Adam's character basically was there's one goblin who's wounded, and Meadow's character Sly is very young and sort of growing into their own. And Adam was no, don't kill that last one. Took out their knife and gave it to Sly. You need to do it. Basically, you need to grow up now. You need to become more serious. Okay. And it was such a powerful moment that we ended up never having that really in the show because just the circumstances that led to that never really happened naturally. Uh-huh. But that is also the beauty of role play and TTRPGs, right? It's part of making art. There's those people who will make ice sculptures. And, the sculpture is going to melt, but that temporary moment of art was the thing that mattered. And sometimes TTRPGs are like that. Even if you do film it, I have a whole bunch of stuff I've done, TTRPG live streams that will never be seen again because they're no longer on the internet. And that's just the nature of it, and you got to enjoy it.
Yeah, it's exactly what I was going to say, is that actual plays have turned something that I don't want to say it's this is a bad thing, but they turned this sort of personal, intimate, and like you said, ephemeral experience into something that's more permanent. And it's different. That even just the way that you approach it sometimes as a player and as a GM is different for how you're designing stuff.
It really is, because you also have to think about, every mistake you make, someone can go back and catch it. If you contradict yourself, they can rewind and see it. The stuff I can get away with at a homebrew game at a live table, the players, even if they took notes, the notes aren't that good. Right. Mm-hmm. And so you can sort of fudge things. But when you have an audience and they can go back, there have been multiple times where some of my colleagues at Forgotten Adventures, they'll be oh, okay. Oh, what was this person? How did they make their money again? One of my Android Grace is one of the people at Forgotten Adventures, an amazingly talented artist, does a lot of the tokens and stuff there. And she helps me with some of the campaign planning. And when we do this, she'll be okay, and we'll have this set up. By the way, what's this noble's source of income? What did you say that was? And I'm did I ever say it? And she was yeah, no, you said it. And she goes back, finds, 30 episodes ago when I'd made this offhand comment about how this guy has a bunch of banks. And it's I guess he's in banking. Well, I guess so. That's all right.
Wow, man, that's where a transcript becomes really useful, just to find stuff like that.
Yeah. Transcripts would be really good, though. It would be awesome if we got to the point where we could have someone like, oh, yeah, I've gone ahead and written down all the notes for the session. I know they have that for like Dimension 20 and they have that for Critical Role. And that is like the dream place I think people want to be. But we'll see if we get there.
Yeah, George R.R. Martin has also mentioned that the fans know his universe better than him at this point. So if he doesn't remember something, he'll like post on his website and say, hey, who is this guy? And then someone else will respond to him.
R.A. Salvatore had to do the same thing. He needed to know what magic items the character Jarlaxle had. And so he went onto his forum with one of his forums with a burner account and was like, hey, I just thought it'd be cool if we statted out Jarlaxle. What items does he have? And they just basically made a list and he was like, thank you. Cool. My job's done.
Oh, man, that character does have a lot of magic items, though. I could easily see how you could lose track.
Yeah, R.A. Salvatore, the world he builds is even crazy. I don't know if how many people know about this, so I'm going to shine a light on it because I think it's funny. There's a character named Quinthel Bainry, who in the series, she's currently really important in D&D, and she was in a mini series called War of the Spider Queen, where she was one of the prominent characters, and now she is the leader of House Bainry. So she's really important. When they were working on War of the Spider Queen, her character was integral to that story, and she's in the first book. And the War of the Spider Queen was a story that was written by like 5 different writers. But the one for her, the written by 5 different writers that are all being managed by R.A. Salvatore. And some writer who's not involved wrote to R.A. Salvatore like, hey, what's the deal with Quinthel? This is great, but how do you explain her coming back to life? And he's like, what? And she's like, yeah, you killed her like 6 books ago. It was like literally like a offhanded comment at the end of a long book where it's like, and Quinthel gets cut down. And it's like, oh, so they had to like quickly fit in a retcon about that happening. Which, yeah, just it goes to show you that if you are running a campaign, even writers with all the resources they do make mistakes like that. It's okay to retcon things. It's okay to get caught off guard. I've also gotten to the point where I just admit it to my players. I'll be like, yeah, you know what? Actually, I was wrong. I got that completely messed up. And it becomes a very comical moment for my players.
Yeah, I think it feels like something when I first started playing, like you want to be perfect.
Yeah.
And since then, I've definitely moved into this area where, like, it's okay to rely on your players and admit mistakes, and they're also okay with it, too. And part of that is just, like, I started playing when I was 10, so we've all absolutely matured since then as part of it.
Yeah, for sure.
But I feel like there's also this cultural shift in just how the game is approached since then as well.
Well, and especially with streams, like what I was saying about, making mistakes and being able to just admit to it and make a retcon right up on the spot. That is absolutely true for all my home games. And I do a lot of games now on Start Playing. I'm running like 10 campaigns right now. So for those, yeah, it's crazy. I'm running that many games. And so for those, I do that. But for streams, and I think that's part of that cultural shift. A lot of people are streaming TTRPGs now, or they're recording it, they're putting it online, hoping to get an audience. And when it comes to that, you can't really treat it the same way. Even just the stories you tell and the things you do at the table, you do have to treat differently. In so much that, hey, there's an audience watching. We can't just have a shopping episode where everyone just asks the item prices for a dozen different things and we sit there for 3 hours. We can't do that because, the audience is going to get bored of that real fast.
Yep.
So you come up with ways to, okay, I say to my players for the live streams often, I'll say this on camera, just, okay, come up with the stuff you guys are hoping to shop for, and I will review the list and see what we can do. And then next episode, we'll talk about you getting that item. So that's how we usually handle it. But yeah, totally different beast.
Yeah, I have noticed that for some of the shows I've watched, where if you look at how it's constructed as an adventure. Like normally an adventure has like, 5 fights before the big boss, is sort of like this building up to it. And actual play adventures tend to not have those as much and really just focus on only the stuff that's like relevant to the plot and not so much the like little minions that are whittling down the player's resources.
And that's a whole issue with things that are like that's the whole action economy thing, and the encounter balance system of, oh well, a player should have 6 to 8 encounters a day, and those encounters don't all need to be combat. Some of them can be puzzles or traps or whatever. But again, you need all of these things to tax the player. That is one thing I've noticed when I do streams. It's one of those things I don't do that. So instead you have to compensate by saying, okay, there's stronger stuff here. All the monsters are tougher because these players aren't taxed. They're all going to use their best stuff. And that even goes a step further with our games on Forgotten Adventures, because on our streams, we have a thing where if people, and I know a lot of people do stuff like this, but we have literally alt bars on the screen for each player that fill up based on donations and bits and stuff like that, and channel points. So then you have an added layer of, okay, we need to scale things up because the party's going to use all of their best resources right out the gate. But also, we need to scale things up because they could use an ult, and that will just obliterate through something. So the way I do that currently is every time a player gets an ult, I also have an ult bar that's much bigger, and it slowly fills up. So that way, if all the players have used all of their ults, it means I probably have one, and I throw in something horrible into the mix. It's in Fears, they've handled everything really, really well in Fears and Fortunes. In the other show we do, Defenders of Handelver, partly because the module is so many dungeons and encounters and things like that, there are some that we skip that are like, we go through the module and we'll be like, this encounter doesn't add anything to the story. It doesn't necessarily add anything to the atmosphere. It's going to just slow everything down. So we might skip one. But then we still have, even if you skip a couple, you still have so many encounters the party's going to get through. And so those parties will get taxed, and they also have the ult system. So then they'll use the ult to sort of like lower that tax on their resources and stuff. But that is also a tax on their resource because the ultimate bar fills up, right? So then they get to a point where it's like, okay, we just got to fight the boss. And it's like, oh, the boss and his twin brother who's just stepped through a portal as I use my ult bar to shift the tides of everything.
At what point is this just like you should be playing Daggerheart almost? Because it has more of that like mechanical system like that.
And that is something I am looking into. I'm a D&D player at heart. I have delved into other systems like Call of Cthulhu. We're working on a Vampire the Masquerade campaign we want to do soon. And I've done some stuff in like Mothership and Kids on Bikes. Daggerheart I have not yet touched, and it looks really cool, but I almost don't know where to pick it up. And I feel like I need to be introduced to the game. That's actually a barrier for most RPGs. I feel like I need someone to almost hold my hand and like walk me through it so I can wrap my head around it. And that's hard to find sometimes. Even if I look up a YouTube video, I need the attention span to sit through it. So I'm like, I got to find like a table or something to play at where I can kind of get introduced to this stuff. But I am looking into that.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. I feel the same way, and there's some systems where I'll read about them and think like, oh, that's cool, but man, I don't want to like GM the system necessarily. It seems like it would be fun as a player for me, but not as a GM.
True.
And I actually haven't read Daggerheart. I know about it from hearing other people talk about it.
Yeah, and it sounds really great. I just gotta find that person who wants to get me into it bad enough. And I think that's honestly the biggest barrier for most RPGs, even D&D. I mentioned earlier I ran into D&D at my job, but like I had always wanted to play D&D as a kid. I remember seeing the books at bookstores and thinking that was really cool, but also thinking that it involved a lot of paper and math, and it was really complicated. And there's also this culture that surrounds a lot of nerd hobbies that, certainly other people are used to, but like there's an atmosphere of sort of gatekeeping or sort of one-upsmanship that makes it very hard to get into it. And that's my biggest regret, is not powering through that to get into D&D earlier in my life, because I would have loved it. But then it's very similar. Like I had the same thing happen to me in like with Magic the Gathering. I was really into that, and I remember building a deck and being so excited to play and going somewhere and being like, yeah, I'd like to play, but I didn't understand the standard system of like what decks were allowed. So I went somewhere and this guy like looked through my deck and he's like, that card's banned, that card's banned, that card's banned. And it was just like, I handed back half my deck and like basically told that like, yeah, I don't know what I'm doing, which I didn't, but it just made it very hard to get into that hobby. And I was always worried D&D was going to be the same way. So I think that's it. I feel like that's also, sorry to go off on tangents here. It's one of the reasons I'm very passionate about getting people into it. So much so, just recently, I did a tutoring program in my local area where I went to a school and taught kids in 3rd and 5th grade how to play D&D. And that was such a rewarding experience, because getting them to learn the basics of it, to start role playing and understand what that's like and how to roll dice and what the numbers mean. It was such a heartwarming experience. I walked away from that with a piece of fan art one of them drew of their characters. And that is the most precious thing I've ever received. I have it framed now. So good. So highly recommend people do that.
Yeah, I did something at my kid's school where I was trying to volunteer there. So yeah, I've had experience with that as well.
That's awesome.
It is fun to see the new generation blossom, and
yeah.
Also, it felt like, wow, this might not work very well for an elementary school for what I was doing. A lot of them were just too young.
How big of a group did you have?
I was in charge of a group of, it was 8 kids.
Oh my God! Yeah, no, that's too many. The group I was in charge of were elementary school kids as well, but it was 3, and then it was 3 kids, and that was great. And then halfway through, we had a 4th kid join because he heard how much fun it was, and that teetered on the edge where when I came home from those sessions, because elementary kids, they have so much energy. But I have to tell this story because I think this is hilarious and people will like it. So this new kid joined, right? And the rest of the players, he's still learning how to play. And the party's like doing like their first real adventures, not just like practice games. They're doing their first real adventure. And they had to rescue Rainier Neverember from he was being held. We were playing Waterdeep Dragon Heist. They had to rescue Rainier Neverember, and they beat up these thugs. And I tell them, yeah, after you beat up the thugs, you find 20 gold on them. And he's like, the kid who was new, he was the one who did the investigation check and thought to check the bodies for gold. So I'm like, you find 20 gold on them. Mm-hmm. And the players are all like, oh, we can split it. And I was like, well, yeah, the 20 gold, there's 4 of you. You could each have 5 gold. And he goes, I give each of them 2 gold and I keep the rest. And another player, she speaks up and she's like, oh, well, can I do like an insight check, or can I tell that he did that? And I was like, sure, you roll deception, you roll insight. She does it. She realizes he's kept all the gold. And then his next question as she starts confronting him is, hey, what's her armor class?
Oh, no.
And I'm like, oh, my God, what are you talking about? So now I chime in as Rainier to all of them. And I'm like, look, if you stop bickering about gold, I will give you 1,000 gold each if you come with me and help us stop this bad guy. And the kids collectively sat there and went, that means Rainier has 4,000 gold on him. It was Like, and again, that's a group of elementary school kids. I did not put any of those ideas in their head. That's just where they went, and they have so much energy. I cannot imagine doing it for a group larger than that. But I highly recommend people do it. But definitely, like a group of 5 elementary kids, I think I would have had a heart attack trying to keep all of them from just killing each other and setting fire to the room.
Yeah,
but yeah.
It was right after Halloween. They were all like,
"Oh no!"
eating candy was most of what they were doing at the table. Yeah, it was a mess.
Oh boy.
Well, yeah. I wanted to talk a bit about the production of Fears and Fortunes before we got into like the
Sure.
plot for it, because yeah, you've got all the great maps and like animations that Forgotten Adventures is making for it. Like you have an intro like animation that plays for everything. I think you said you made yourself.
Yeah. So, well, not entirely. We have an artist who's very talented who works with us, Karis Alexandra. You can find her on Instagram. She does all the character art, and then I came to her for that first show we did for Forgotten Adventures, and I was like, I want to do something crazy for this. I had been learning how to do limited animation stuff. And so we blocked out a storyboard of, I'm not a full like time animator, and she can't draw she can draw amazingly. She does not have the time, and we don't have the budget for her to draw multiple, frames of a real animation the way it would be done traditionally. So we were relying on limited animation and saying, okay, what can we accomplish with the fewest number of frames and assets that we can make? So that way this is somewhere within the wheelhouse of what our budget is. And she did an amazing job. So yeah, we were able to put that together. It's the kind of stuff, if you watch Invincible or if you look at any anime that gets criticized on Reddit, and they'll show like, oh, they just used a PNG and they moved it closer to the camera or something like that. And it's like, yeah, that's an animation technique. Yeah, they didn't draw multiple frames of this creature flying towards the camera, because why would they waste their time on that when they could do all this other stuff?
Yeah.
So that's what we rely on, which I love, because I'm like a fan of the old school Scooby-Doo, which, they're running back and forth, running through the same 3 doors for 20 minutes or something like that.
Right. Yeah.
So, I made the intro with her help, and yeah, we found someone to do music for Fandelver. We even went a step further and got music from Arcane Anthems. I've written this song, and he turned it into this just awesome rock anthem kind of sounding song, which, yeah, dream come true to work with him as well.
The animation also like reminds me of a animated comic book. If you've seen any of those before, where it's working with just a comic book, so it doesn't have a lot for each of the different images, so it has to take what's there and then sort of rig it up and make it into a moving character.
Exactly. And those are all the people who complain about anime and stuff. I understand why, but that's what they just don't understand, that this is a technique called limited animation. And yeah, getting something to move. There's this one shot we had where someone had like a cape moving, and finding out how to make that look natural and flow seamlessly was very difficult, but we were able to do it without having an artist draw that cape 30 times, which is what it would normally take.
Yeah.
And that's definitely sort of the inspiration for it too. I was around for those early days of moving comics where, like, back when you had to use AOL to log on to the internet. Mm-hmm. And I learned a lot of that stuff back then too, on like, okay, what can we do for this that makes it, interesting and keeps the motion in the scene without, again, drawing so much.
Yeah, I personally think it's the best way to experience the Watchmen comic.
Nice. Yeah, I'll have to check that out sometime. Huge fan of the Watchmen series. Well, huge fan of Watchmen, and then unfortunately they've made more of it.
Yeah, that's fun. We don't have to get into that.
No, we don't. No, we're good.
But I mean, it goes beyond just like the animation, because you also have like animated scene backgrounds for when the characters are just talking. There's like the newspaper that you made, and like all the music that you mentioned. There's a tremendous amount of stuff that you have for this.
A lot of that comes from the Patreon community, which is honestly growing beyond just Patreon. But, there was a point, I think, in 2020 when the pandemic happened and a lot of people stopped playing games together in person and a lot of stuff switched to online. So you had an explosion in the VTT community and the VTT world. And a lot of these creators blew up because of that. Forgotten Adventures, obviously one of the biggest ones out there.
Mm-hmm.
But you also had people out there from other communities. The animations that you talk about for the backgrounds, those come from James RPG Art, who does amazing backgrounds. And we use a lot of those for both shows. And then there's so many people making music, like Arcane Anthems. There's Tabletop Music Bazaar was one that I was using for a long time. And Michael Gelfi Studios, they also make some amazing tracks that we use. And we make sure to credit all of them in our end credits and tell people about them when they ask.
Like right now?
Yeah, exactly. It's one of those things, like the community for virtual tabletop has grown so much, and thanks to things like Patreon and other forms of sort of crowdsourcing and crowdfunding, you're seeing these communities and these content makers blow up. It's honestly one of the things I think is really good about it's rather one of the reasons why I think when WotC came out with their Sigil program, I thought from the beginning, I was like, this isn't going to work because, like, with Sigil, everything was going to be virtual and you're going to have 3D tokens and 3D backgrounds. And, like, the amount of work that goes into a single 3D model, like, you need to draw the thing, but you need to draw it from every angle, and you need to draw the skin on it. Then you need to model it, and then you got to animate it. And that's so much more work. You're not going to be able to make an entire repertoire of monsters. You're not going to be able to make an entire full active 3D scene. And more specifically, you won't be able to do that for anything that someone can come up with in their homebrew campaign. It's one of the reasons I love working with Forgotten Adventures is a lot of their assets, if you look them up, a lot of their assets and stuff that they use to make their maps and make their tokens, they have an entire section on their site for kit bashing where, people have taken parts of our tokens and cut them up and put them together in different ways and, made modifications to them to fit their home game. That's something that's at a level of skill that I think a lot of people can approach. Whereas if you said the same thing for something like Sigil or a 3D map program of any kind, again, you're asking someone, oh, you have this cool idea of a homebrew monster. Just go ahead and 3D model it, texture it, animate it, then import it in. And it's like no one has the time for that for a creature that's going to show up one session. But hopefully we make it easy. Like, Forgotten Adventures not only has the ability for people to do that, but even on their website, they have a whole bunch of tips for kit bashing and how they do that and what kind of brushes they use and things like that to make it very accessible.
I was thinking of Spore when you said, like, do you remember that game where you could, like, I mean, that's kind of like rigging and getting movement for a new three-dimensional character.
And how well did that game do back then? Like, it struggled. I think it has a cult following now, but when it came out, it was a huge disappointment. And like, you do have stuff out there like Hero Forge, for example. I do love what Hero Forge is doing, where you can do kit bashing there as well and make your own creations and stuff like that. But even they then run into legality issues of, different creature designs and stuff like that. But yeah, it's tricky. It's hard to come up with original stuff and to support a community that is all about homebrew, which the TTRPG community naturally is.
Right.
But to do that on a scale like Wizards of the Coast was trying to do is that's just crazy. I don't know why someone thought that was a good idea. Anyway, that's not
it's
the crap talking at all.
But it's the execution that's the difficult part for it.
That's always the issue, right? Ideas are very cheap and easy, and it's that would be great. And if pigs flied, we could do that, but they don't. Yeah. So so we can't. But yeah, we got completely off topic. Where were we?
We were talking about the amazing production value for Fears and Fortunes. Well, yeah, let's talk about the setting for the show. It starts off in the Agario region for Bearuport.
A Bearuport, yeah.
Yep.
That was something we came up with. There's a lot more to it I can't say yet. If you talk to me again in 2 more seasons, I'll be able to tell you everything about this world. But Bearuport is a strange place where it has a sort of traditional, fantasy kingdom that's really just one big city and some outlying towns, and they have a king and a strange nobility system that we're still fleshing out. But yeah, it feels very much like and that was part of our design, is we wanted to feel like your classic fantasy sandbox, and then fill it with stuff that's very complicated and stuff that has lots of questions with it. So many of the bad guys the players face, they end up finding out have tragic backstories or good motivations that ultimately became corrupted and destroyed them at the end. And so you get this very complex sort of we got to a point where so many of the villains had complex issues and background that they came to me last season. Before each season, I asked the players, like, hey, what are some stuff you want this season? And this past season, they said to me, they wanted 2 things. One, they wanted me to kick their ass, because that's what I do to the Fandelver table. They wanted me to give them really brutal encounters. I don't know why any party would ask for that, but that's what they did. And then the next thing they asked for was, we want villains that we can just completely hate, that we don't have to feel bad about. Uh-huh. And that's because so many of the stuff they ran into in this, what looks like a very traditional medieval fantasy sandbox, were actually very complicated people with flaws and dreams, and, who made mistakes or became this way because of abuse that they suffered over their life. And it's made a lot of their combats and stuff like that very rough, where they're like, but we got to beat this person. Yeah, but also, don't we feel bad for them?
Stop making 3-dimensional characters.
Stop making 3-dimensional. Yeah, which, fair point, in so much that, this is a weird thing to run into currently today. I think it's almost topical, where you're in a world where so many villains are just a shade of gray. And it's like, every Marvel movie, even I know I'm not the first person to talk about this, but Thanos is like, oh, well, he had a point. And it's like, really? Do they though? Does every character need to be gray and 3-dimensional? Can't some of them just be bad people? And so in our show, we tried to do both. You have people who are like, hey, if this person was ever a good person, that time is gone. But then we also have so many villains who, you get to know them and you feel bad for them, but they still need to be stopped. Or we had characters too where, the party feels bad for them. They do need to be stopped, but maybe we can stop them by not just killing them. Maybe we can get them to step down. Maybe we can get them to surrender, or maybe even one of the earliest ghosts they fought, instead of defeating this ghost, they were able to do a wedding ceremony to reunite them with their lost lover. And that made the ghost basically at peace and go away, which totally not what I had planned, but love that they came up with that. But yeah, keeping it interesting.
Well, I had a similar thing for a ghost in my campaign where they played along with what it wanted and had it get married, and then it was happy and it disappeared.
Yeah. Now for ours, the ghost disappeared, but remember, this was all based on a tarot deck. And so the tarot deck was all about capturing these ghosts and putting them back in the deck. So what happens when you free a ghost and let it rest peacefully? Well, now, in the first season, they're left with an empty card. And, oh no, what goes in that card? What possibly could go into it. Our quest, the party's quest throughout the campaign, is to put all the spirits back in the deck. But what do you do when one of those spirits no longer exists because you put it at peace? They've done this twice now. And the first one we solve in season 1, and I won't say how because it's gut-wrenching. But now they're doing it again. They have a card tomorrow night, our last session of season 4. They're going to hopefully put something in the deck, but if they don't tomorrow night, I got bad news. It's probably going to be heartbreaking if they don't manage to do that. It's probably going to end very badly.
Yeah, I did want to ask about, like, because you've been doing the campaign for like over 100 sessions now, and from the initial setup of like, okay, 14 ghosts are loose, maybe 4, maybe 5 sessions per ghost if you really want to stretch it out a bit, and that gets you to 70 sessions. So presumably something else has happened.
Well, no. Well, so we do 10 episode seasons. We're ending season 4, so that's 40 episodes. And we have, once this ends, we'll have one more ghost that remains. And from there, yeah, I think you might have mixed up with. So there's 2 shows, Defenders of Phandelver, that has 30 episodes. Our other show, Fears and Fortunes, that has 40 episodes because we do 10 episode seasons. So right now we're actually going into our 41st episode tomorrow. And then we're aiming for the series to have somewhere between 50 and 60 episodes. So one more season left. Mm-hmm. So that still, drags out from it being just 14 ghosts. Initially, when I planned this, I was like, this will take 2 seasons. It'll be great. And just, a lot of dramatic role playing and a lot of solving mysteries and stuff we had to do to sort of build out the world. It expanded the world from just a 2-season show into this.
Man, every time I plan out, this will take this many sessions, I'm always like severely underestimating it.
Yeah, always. Always.
I'm not surprised.
And it's hard. Like we constantly have moving goals. I think we're getting closer to. We've been getting better in these last 4 seasons of basically figuring out how long it takes certain things to happen and figuring out where we can put shortcuts in. I think that's the biggest thing, is knowing if you're, because this is, again, part of that evolution of TTRPGs on and in this medium of streaming and YouTube and stuff like that, where it's like, where can we put shortcuts in, because we can't let this take as many sessions as it needs. We have a window to fill up, especially our cast is paid. So we can't just keep going indefinitely. All of our players are getting paid. And if we need 30 extra episodes because we didn't plan well, that's going to cost us. Which obviously, we've been growing and we've been continuing to expand and do more of that. But at the same time, we don't want to commit to something like that. Like, what if we end up in a spot where, we really can't keep going on that show, or we can't we need to change tacks or something. We don't want to leave the audience hanging. So, but we've been zeroing in on how long something takes and then putting in shortcuts saying like, well, if they don't do this, if they don't get this figured out in this amount of time, what's our backup plan? How can we speed along? And part of our solution for that has been thinking about what our villains are doing. If the party's taking too long on something, saying, okay, well, while that's happening, the villain's doing X, Y, and Z. And so if the party takes too long to solve a mystery, then the villain comes up with a breakthrough. And so now we speed the story along by following that path instead.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's one way to fix it.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was talking about before, about having differences in how you're GMing for an actual play versus a home game where, like, yeah, you do have to take into account audience perception and also, yes, sort of your own production limitations.
Yeah, there's also, There's also something I've learned that a big difference with running actual plays and running home games. And I actually think it might be something that should be more true for home games. But I've learned over my years of doing this, so much of being a GM, you want to keep secrets from your players and you want to surprise them with things. And that's absolutely true. And obviously we aren't running a scripted show. But at the same time, what I've run into is if you completely surprise a player, especially in an actual play, like completely surprise them, you might surprise them to a point where they're not able to just be a role player, and where they also might feel more uncomfortable with a certain situation or subject matter, especially because we're running horror. And so, you know, it's one of those things where it's like, oh, surprise, like your arm has been chopped off. And it's like, okay, well, you know, the player is going to go through a wide range of emotions because maybe they didn't want their character's arm chopped off, right? Or maybe they didn't see this coming, or maybe they think that you're picking on them for that moment of doing that. So if you're going to have like a huge revelation or some huge thing happen, specifically, you're not going to prep the entire table. Don't do that. You want the other players to have genuine reactions. But if you're going to do something, especially in horror or something like that, that targets a single player, I've been finding it where it's like just warning them like, hey, these are the choices you've made. Even if I have to do it in between a break between, you know, something happens and then it's like, oh, we'll go to a 15-minute break. And then during that break, I take them aside and say, hey, you made these decisions. This is going to happen. Are you okay with this? Are you prepared for that? And when you go through that, they're more ready to deal with it. They're not taken aback so much, and they're able to approach it as a role player and a gamer, as a role player and less as a gamer, where, like, you know, if you're playing a video game and your character dies horribly, you might get upset, but no one's necessarily watching unless you're streaming it or something, right? But like,
well, and you can also just go back. Like, that's another.
Yeah,
component.
You can go back. We can't do that in TTRPGs, and so it's like, and like, obviously everyone has their comfort space. There are some players where I don't feel the need to warn them because I know that they are a glutton for punishment and they will take it right on the chin and roll with it. But there are others where it's like, I've been learning over the last 10 years that you do need to prepare them. And that is something I do a lot of in actual plays because, again, you know, it's live, we're being filmed. You don't want them to have some of those emotions that maybe, you know, like if you lose a game and you're upset and there's a bunch of other people there watching you, it makes it worse, right? But if they're able to process it and stuff like that, a great example is we had in Defenders of Phandelver, we had a player, they made a decision and they had decided to rush this mind flayer and attack them, and the mind flayer ended up grappling them with their tentacles, and the mind flayer standing with their back to a spinning green portal. And the turn initiative goes around, and this villain absolutely wants to escape. And so, yeah, they really, really want to escape, and they have a player grappled. They only need to step backwards, and they will probably either A, kill the player by extracting their brain and then stepping backwards, or B, just stepping backwards and dragging the player along. And if they go through that portal, the parties, whether he gets his brain sucked out now or later, won't matter because the party will never see them again.
Yep.
And we went around the initiative at the table and we came to that moment. And when it was clear that no one was going to be able to do anything, I was like, all right, let's go to break. And then in the middle of break, I'm talking to that player like, hey, just, you know, like, this might be it. Are you prepared for that? And he's like, oh, like, and I'm like giving him this moment to spell it all out, because that's the other thing is I don't think an audience wants to see debate at the table where it's like, wait, what do you mean? Why can't I, well, wait, he has me, he's going to pull me, like, explaining all of that.
Right.
It can get contentious. It can get uncomfortable. And obviously those are feelings you mitigate at a live table, and there again, there's not an audience, so there's less pressure. But that's what we've been doing is, so I warned him like, hey, are you ready for this? Is that cool? He's like, yeah, okay, yeah. And so he's prepared now to possibly die depending on what happens next. What I did not tell him or the other players is when we come back, just before this Mind Flayer's turn is about to go, I had the Mind Flayer reach out to another player, the Wizard, who had basically a bargaining chip that Mind Flayer wanted. And the Mind Flayer was like, hey, give me that. So, or this person's going to die. And it was like one of those things where it's a mental conversation. And while it's happening, time has like slowed down in the room.
Yeah, it was like a TV trope for that. Yeah.
Yeah. And so in that moment, that player got to have a genuine reaction. But if that went horribly wrong, the player whose life me and that other player are deciding on, they're not going to be heartbroken. So it actually made the situation more tense because the player who was at stake knew that they were at stake. They knew I might die immediately after this. And I've already consented to that. So now we're just seeing if that's actually what's going to happen. So yeah, it's a weird thing. It's definitely a different medium.
Yeah.
But as it sometimes like I've more come around to like I think that might be the right approach even for a table, just because you don't know how someone's going to react with something. Like you want to surprise them, but is the surprise worth it if the player is going to be uncomfortable or angry or something like that? Get them in on it. Let them buy in and let them be a willing participant in their suffering rather than a surprise participant, Yeah,
it's like there's different ways that people, like the goals that a player has for a game, like whether they want to have a good story or whether they want to embody a character. So if they prefer the character approach, they're going to be less comfortable with a character dying in that way.
Yeah.
But if they prefer the story approach, then it's like, well, that's a interesting end to the character, and I still get to play a different character, and they might be more okay with it from that perspective.
Yeah, and you get players if we're talking about character depth, but if you talk about like a character backstory, for example, you do have players who come to the table and they're like, you know what, man? I don't even want to know what my backstory is. You tell me. And you get to have them be an amnesic, character who made a deal with the devil that they don't remember, and you get to do something wild with their backstory. And you have players who want that. They want to be completely surprised, and they want to hand you the reins, and they want to hand you control of their fate exclusively. That's great. And we all are okay with that. But you have players who come to the table and it's like, no, this is the character I want to play. This is the story I'm trying to tell.
Right.
And we're used to that. What we're not used to is on the reverse end is when the player's going to die. You do have those players who are like, I don't want to see it coming. I want you to just hit me with it. And I want to take it in the moment. Okay, great. But you also have the players who's like, if I'm going to die, I want to know I need to write a soliloquy. I need to write a last will and testament for this character. I need to put myself in that headspace and get ready to say goodbye. Like, yeah. And there are people who will be like, oh, well, sometimes it just happens, and it's like, well, yeah, that's real life. Yeah. Sometimes it just happens. But unless that's what the player signed up for, you gotta keep them in mind. So that's just my thoughts.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it also gets even more complicated in D&D because of resurrection being on the table for a lot of campaigns.
Yeah, that's something I do really well, actually. Because one of my favorite things to do is I do something, player dies. Next step, ask them what their alignment is. And depending on their alignment, a lot of players are going to have some kind of good alignment. Generally, that means they're going to heaven, right? And the thing about D&D, if you think about it, people can be brought back to life, but not always. They have to choose to come back to life. Almost every resurrection spell says if they are willing, they are brought back to life. So a character dies, take them to heaven. show them what they're going to see, tell them all the stuff that they're going to encounter, all of the loved ones they're going to see again, all of the closure they're going to feel. And that's going to do one of two things. One, it's going to make it very tempting for them to say no to coming back to life. It's also going to make it heartbreaking when they do say yes, they want to come back to life. I had one player, May LaFay, ran into this in a campaign we did a long time ago, and she's one of the players in Fears and Fortunes. Her character had died, and when they went to heaven, I was like, yeah, you see your mom, and your mom tells you that it's okay, and they embrace you, and she hasn't seen her mom in years, and she's in real life crying because May LaFay is an amazing role player. And as that's happening, her friends are getting a resurrection scroll and bring her back to life. And so when she gets that feeling of her soul being pulled back, she can resist it. And instead she has to say, no, Mom, I can't stay here. I love you so much. And I hope I'll see you again. And I'm like, oh, that's the good stuff right there.
Yeah.
So yeah, I love doing that. And I had one time, one of the players from Fears and Fortunes ran into this where their character died in a campaign I was running. And when they got to heaven, their God told them, like, hey, no, this was part of the plan. Thanks to you dying here, all of these other things are going to happen. And you actually did exactly what I put you on the world to do. And after telling them that, they're like, yeah, no, I don't think he would come back. That's everything he needed. And it was heartbreaking for the players because it was like level 1 and this character died, except the way it happened and the meaning of it all, they were just completely at peace with it. And so the party just had to accept he's never coming back. But yeah, you can always make something terrifying even by making it wonderful. That's the lesson there.
Yeah. I think, I mean, not everybody plays this way, but it is a really great experience to get that emotion out of your players when you're playing, and out of yourself as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Man, we've been having a much more meta conversation about your campaign
Sorry.
and the different experiences you've had than I was expecting. It's perfectly fine.
Cool.
Yeah. Where did I want to go? I wanted to talk about the Seer as a character, because in that first session, there's little bits that are teased about her. Like, she died 20 years ago. She's the one that has the tarot deck that has all the ghosts that are trapped in it. And the way she died 20 years ago was very gruesome. It seems like, everybody in the kingdom loves the Seer, but we get very little actual information about kind of why.
Yeah. A lot of it is to do with there's the cards she trapped, and a lot of the cards that she made were bad people. A lot of them have very conflicting, stuff that you can relate to and be empathetic with, but a lot of them needed to be stopped. And so she stopped those people. That's one of the reasons people love her. But there's also a whole bunch of more run-of-the-mill things that they did that never turned into tarot cards. And those are kind of heroics. She stopped a troll that was rampaging down the street. She thwarted this robbery. She cured this person of a disease, things like that. Mm-hmm. And so that's where the kingdom really revolves around that mythos of her. It's also the kingdom's coming out of a really dark place where originally they had this massive war called the Pren War, where they were at war with elves, and a lot of people died on both sides. And the Seer was part of ending that war. And so that's also where part of the mythos came. And pretty much every time something cataclysmic happened, the Seer was there. And so, yeah, people kind of build this mythos around them. And that was something we knew we wanted to do from the start. And one of the most challenging things was, our story revolves around the character Sly, played by Howdy Love Darlin.
Right.
So we have this player who is essentially playing a very main character kind of character in this story, someone with main character energy. And going into that's usually something you don't want at a D&D table, is someone who is the main character. it was one of those things where we talked to the other players about it, and we took it on a vote. The option was for the party, we could either have an NPC play the role of, the granddaughter of the seer and who touched this deck and started all the events, or we can do a story where it's one of you guys. And they voted on it, and they were comfortable with Meadow doing it. And she did such an amazing job where she's playing into that mythos and playing into that story, but she's also making sure to bounce off of all the other players so they get their moment in the spotlight, and so that their impact on her life feels just as significant as the main story, rather than just, oh yeah, the story's about her and you're all sidekicks. Yeah, which you don't ever want that at a D&D table. I mean, some D&D tables might be very specific kind of interest, I guess.
Well, when I talked about how one of my players had that anxiety about what their character was doing, and that was actually when I had done a campaign that had a main character. That player felt like there was a lot of extra pressure on them because they didn't want to constantly be the main character within a role-playing game, because that's it is somewhat a zero-sum game where you're taking away the experience from other people if everyone's always interacting with you. If all the NPCs are talking to the king PC, then all the non-king PCs are getting less time to play the game. So he was quite careful about making sure that wasn't a problem for other people.
Yeah, and that's true, and it's the same thing with and the risk I would have ran if the quote unquote main character was a DMPC. Having that DMPC of oh, this is a story all about his character, and we're all just sort of here for it. You obviously don't want that, and again, that's where I think where Howdy Loves Darlin has done such an amazing job is, one, bouncing off of other players, elevating them wherever she can, but also not making a character who's perfect. Having them have, they're a rogue and they're really good at a few things, and then there's tons of stuff that they can't do. So now they need those other players and they need their help and guidance and stuff like that. And also sort of the way she's playing this character as being young and naive, where it's all the other characters in character have more knowledge and experience than her. And so she can bounce off of them and rely on them. But yeah, no, I have empathy for your friend. It's not an easy spot to be in. But the other thing, again, get the other players to sign up. If they are on board with this, if this is the story they want to hear and the story they want to tell, you shouldn't run into as many issues. As long as you're trying to be generous and they're on board with it, that's all that matters. Again, at the end of the day, most important thing is that everyone at the table is having fun. The only added thing for us is that we also need to make sure the audience is having fun. So a little bit balancing act there.
Yeah. I was curious about the collaborative nature for what you're doing, because, as a more produced show, I was curious, there must be more that goes in beforehand to make sure that all of the characters mesh with a story that also has all these other sort of restrictions on it. So how did you create the PCs to go with the campaign that you were imagining?
We sat down, and for what I like to do for every campaign I run, but especially if I'm streaming it, is have the players sit down, again, educate them on what the campaign's about, what kind of story we're trying to tell, what kind of things we're looking for, and then let them come up with ideas. I'll usually tell players, come up with 2 or 3 ideas of what you're trying to play. And sometimes we don't literally come back with a list, but we'll do this in session 0 where someone's I'm thinking of playing this role in the group and this role in the story. Daniel, the DM, said early on that they had this idea of playing this character who's sort of a rough and tough mercenary who has this softer side and sort of close with Sly's family and is sort of like a father figure of sorts. And everyone gushed at that at the table. And we were like, oh my God, that would be so good. So, okay, we're going to, he's building a character. We like the idea. We're also going to build the world with that in mind, which I think that's just a healthy thing to do. I think that's what GMs should be doing is, you don't just build the world and then ask the players to show up without, any idea of what they're getting into. Have them make their characters, and then you got to cater the world to them. So we did that. And then we did that test game to make sure that everything sort of meshed. And we saw real quickly, like, okay, these are the kind of roles people are going to play. This is how they contribute to the party and the story. And then the only other thing is, after we do that, we do a check-in each season, in between seasons, basically saying like, hey, how are you feeling? Where are things you want? Where are things you want to happen in the story? What are things that you don't want to happen? And that doesn't mean we're going to do those things or not do those things, but it's getting a feel for, oh, I really want to go more into my backstory. Okay, well, now we know that's something maybe we can swing in there, or maybe we don't swing into it, but we leave the breadcrumbs there. And if the party picks up on them and follows that thread, great, we get into it. And if they don't, sometimes a player says they want something and it's like, well, yeah, I want that, but I don't want to abandon the main story, or I didn't want to make a risk in doing that. Okay, that's fine. But at least we know we've put those elements in the story.
Right.
So yeah, honestly, just communication. It's like number one.
I'm not shocked that's the answer.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you for walking me through it. Like, just seeing how you approached it is encouraging.
Yeah.
But yeah, my main curiosity there was whether you had, like, here's the character you're going to play, Aaron, and here's the character you're going to play, Skylar.
No.
And
There was also stuff that, like, when Skylar Seymour came to the game, they want to play a sea elf. For the longest time, I've had a rule, which is no sea elves and no tritons. And that is because I don't want to build an entire fantasy world underwater. I don't want to ask the Forgotten Adventure teams to make entire underwater city maps, unless we're really committed to that. And so it's just like having a sea elf or a triton, and they got this whole like underwater kingdom to go back to. That is such a huge burden on the GM that I feel like it's acceptable to say no to. But of course, that's what Skylar Seymour want to do. So they pitched it, and I was like, okay, you can do that, but you can never go home again. We are not ever going to the underwater city. And so he made a character who is curious about the surface, and they are trying to acclimate to this world and understand it. So now they don't have a reason to want to go home. One day we might do that. That would be cool. It would be interesting to see. But, again, he made the character what he wanted, but he made certain concessions so that way we could build the story around him as well. Same thing with Fable's character. May LaFay plays Fable, and she plays a race called Semic Hybrid. That's something from Magic the Gathering, and this is obviously not a Magic the Gathering setting. So she came and she said she wanted to play this, and so it's like, okay, sit down and ask, why do you want to play this? What about this is interesting? And the interesting part was having this sort of animal aspect without being something like a shifter or being something, not being a tabaxi or something like that. They wanted these cat elements. They want to sort of be a cat girl, and they want to be unique. And so it's like, okay, well, if we do Semic Hybrid, could we make you someone who's at the circus? And then I pitched to them even further. Could we make you someone who was experimented on and had these parts stitched into them? And they were like, yeah, love that. So from there, okay, that now I'm, one of the tarot cards they ran into, and this is all in season 1, was the Bone Collector, who was this like plague doctor who had experimented on Fable and, basically gave her these cat ears and a tail. And eventually from there, it started to like blend into her DNA, and her eyes became cat eyes and stuff like that. And so we did all that. But again, that was, we sort of built the story around what the player wanted, but also the player made certain concessions to allow us to sort of fit it all together. And that's the whole back and forth communication part that matters. If you're not doing that, then when you end up in a situation where it's like, oh, well, I was thinking this, and you're like, well, no, that's not. Why did you think I was going to do this? Again, communication is key.
Yeah, it's come across really well. I feel like each of them
Thank you.
does a very good job within the world that you've set up, and it's nice.
Yeah, it sounds like you've watched a bunch of Fears and Fortunes, and I'm very grateful and excited to hear that. And thank you for being so interested in it that you want to talk to us about it. I would say too, I'm very curious what you'll think of Defenders when you get to it, because we have a lot of, we're telling a story about a module, right? We're following a module, and yet the ways in which we aren't following the module or the ways in which we're adding to it, I think you'll find very interesting.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious if I should read it beforehand, because I haven't actually done that adventure.
Yeah, so Lost Mine and Phandelver is sort of like it's a very like cliche adventure of sorts. There's a MacGuffin, there's someone you have to rescue, and you follow that path and end up in a dungeon. And that's, it's the starting adventure for people who it's in the starter kit. What Phandelver and Below does is it adds this whole element that's happening behind that. So you do the original Lost Mines of Phandelver, but when you get done with it, by then this other plot has started to evolve and grow out of that, involving mind flayers and the Far Realm and body horror. And so, when we sat down, we were doing Fears, and Fears came off with a great start. People really liked the show, and we got nominated for Crit Awards in our first year of streaming. And so from there, we were like, okay, well, we have all these Phandelver maps. We want to do that. And so when we approach this show, you'll see it's essentially we're telling a classic adventure story of 5 plucky heroes going on this starter quest, but it's also a slow burn into this psychological horror and, this world of body horror and madness and insanity. So you kind of get this, hey, everything starts off really great. We're heroes. We're going to save the day. And it slowly devolves and mutates and grows. And, that's where we're going. Just that slow burn. And once again, that's what we pitched to the players. The players were like, oh my God, yes, sign me up for that. And yeah, so really excited. I'm excited to see what you'll think of that. And I'm excited to see what you'll think of the end of Fears and Fortunes, because we're going into season 5, and season 5 has some really big reveals I don't think anyone's ready for, and some payoffs that explain a lot of things. Even the question you asked me today, I'm like, that's so interesting, that question. Can't wait to answer that for real later.
Well, I'm glad that I hit on the things that were most interesting to come in, but I mean, that is a problem when I interview actual plays, is that sometimes the question's like, oh, well, we want people to watch and experience it that way, so I don't get the answers to my questions.
Yeah, I hope it gave you good enough answers where it's like, okay, this answers it, gets people interested. But yeah, you don't also want to be like, well, you see, what I'm doing is, actually, it turns out their brother's been alive this whole time. And it's like, oh my God, you just ruined the story in the advertisement.
Right. Yeah, we don't want to have the whole movie in the trailer as a
exactly.
Yeah. Well, I think we've hit most of the ends of the questions that I think you can answer about the show.
Yeah. Do you have any questions about Forgotten Adventures?
I What do you want to tell me about it, I guess?
Let me tell you about Forgotten Adventures. Forgotten Adventures, and I'm a big advocate. Obviously, I'm doing marketing for them. Yeah, but
that's the show.
Before I was doing that, I was just a consumer of theirs. I was a customer. I was one of their Patreon backers, and I just really liked their content. Their maps and their map assets look really clean and polished. And then I started to, as I, eventually got onboarded, like 4 years after I started being their customer, I learned more about the group. I thought Forgotten Adventures was just one guy just making stuff, and that was really cool. I find out it's like an entire team of artists from around the world, and they're all working on making these very polished assets and these amazing tools. Both their FA Nexus module, which allows you to make maps in Foundry, and they also have their map program, FA Battle Maps, which allows you to just import fully made maps with sound and lighting and all that stuff. And also their entire token library, which you can also find in FA Nexus. It's just been a wild experience working with people who have such a passion for D&D and art, and again are coming from all these diverse backgrounds. It's not what I expected at all. It's just a bunch of people who love TTRPGs making stuff. So yeah, I just wanted to share that.
Yeah.
Cool.
Well, yeah. Anything else that you want to say about the campaign or Forgotten Adventures?
Definitely check out the stuff we're working on. We have new stuff coming out all the time, and we are working on some new shows. We're currently working on eventually doing a pirate campaign. We did a survey of our audience asking them what games that they wanted us to play on stream and stuff like that. And the biggest response was a write-in for Homebrew Pirate Campaign. And the players were already asking me to do that, but the fact that became the number one thing that people asked us to do, I was like, I guess that's what we're doing. I guess that's it. I literally have the soon-to-be pirate captain of that campaign messaging me right now about the new maps we just came out with. So, yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking that's going to have some good maps.
Oh, for sure.
And you're using D&D for that as the plan, not 7th Sea or something else?
We're looking at D&D. I'm going to explore Daggerheart to see if there's a way we can use that, because I'm very interested in doing that. But, it's funny. I sat down and I have a bunch of players who are planning to be in it, and they were asking like, what's it going to be? And these are players who are playing Daggerheart and stuff like that on a regular basis. And I was like, oh, well, I was thinking D&D, and they're like, yes, mainly because I think the crunchiness, they really want to like throw fireballs at other ships. And I'm like, oh God, what am I getting into? So we'll see how it goes. This whole next year is going to be me finishing both of these campaigns and then starting that. So we're sort of like in the pre-production of those campaigns, the pirate one. Yeah. And what's the other one we're doing? Pirate one, and we're looking at possibly doing Descent into Avernus, which also whole different beast, tons of assets we'll have to make. So we'll see how that goes.
Yeah. I mean, just having those assets for people that are also playing that adventure would be great, too.
Absolutely.
Well, I always finish up by asking if you have any DMing advice that you want to share for people. I feel like you've already given some nuggets as we've been going through this, but yeah.
Yeah, I think my biggest thing is communication and getting player buy-in. Whenever you are unsure, go and get player buy-in. And if you're going to surprise somebody, consider getting their buy-in on being surprised. I know the temptation is to say, no, but what about, the look on their face when you tell them that their mother has actually been their arch nemesis and is alive and has kidnapped their brother. And it's like, that's great. But also, are you sure that they want to have that kind of story or have that kind of emotional moment? Are they ready for that right now? Get their buy-in. If they buy in, great. You don't have to do it super early in advance. You could do it 15 minutes before the session, so that way they are still shocked and still surprised, but at least have a moment to brace themselves for that. And that would be my advice.
Yeah, I think there's also ways to ask questions that are sort of about that topic, but not.
Yes.
Don't give away the surprise. Like, you could ask, are you okay with your mother dying in this adventure? And they say, oh, yeah, I guess I am. And then you could probably maybe kill their father instead. And it's like close enough that it's still a surprise and still kind of aligned with what that conversation was.
For sure. Yeah. And that's actually another good piece of advice. You know, it's okay to psychologically mess with your players, again, if they bought in on it. Asking those questions and then not doing anything, a lot of fun. A lot of fun to see them squirm and be like, why did you ask me that? Why did you ask me that? Just wonder for an entire week until next session. But again, get their buy-in. If that's the kind of psychological gaslighting campaign they want, great. That is the ones that a lot of my players want, but that doesn't mean it's for everybody.
Yeah, I remember that from when I was first starting to play. The DM would roll behind the screen when nothing was happening. We'd be like, what are you rolling for? Mm-hmm. Oh, nothing. Start panicking and feel like, okay, we need to move. Something's coming. We got to get out of here.
I had this great moment we have a clip of in Fears in our fourth season. The very first episode of the fourth season, they encountered this puzzle, and it was basically the game of connections where they have to put categories together. And it was like a connections game they had to do to get into this mummy's tomb or something like that. And as they're doing it, they finally figure it out. They're breezing through it. There's a combat encounter happening while they're doing it. And they figure it out. And the last category was power words. So the words were kill, heal, stun, and I forget what the other one is. Kill, heal, stun, something else. But, it's those power words. And they say, oh, this is power words. And they get it. I'm like, you solved the puzzle. And then I went, how many hit points do you have left? What? Do you have under 100 hit points? What are you talking about? Why would you ask that? Why would you ask that? I'm like, well, because power word kill, if you have less than 100 hit points, you die instantly. They start freaking out, and I'm like, because as the puzzle ends, as you solve it, everything clicks into place and the magic goes away and you're done. But to see the relief on them afterwards, so good. So good.
Oh, man. Evil.
Be evil, but get their buy-in first. That's my advice.
Yeah, it goes back to something you mentioned earlier, that like when you're building stories, you need to have sort of expected turns to the story. Like, you don't want to have something that's a complete surprise.
Yeah.
Because then, like, your audience will get irritated and feel uncomfortable with it. And your audience is your players, and you sort of have a secondary audience of the people watching the show. But the players need to sort of expect where the story is going in some fashion. So they need to know that something is going to happen. Not necessarily what it is, but something.
Yeah. And that's the whole other thing, too. Like what you said, you have two audiences. You have the audience that's the players, and you have the audience that's the audience. And, while it's great to surprise the audience with something, that's one thing I'm a huge pet. It's a big pet peeve of mine is, people, especially, in the world of post Game of Thrones, subverting expectations and doing something that people don't expect. It seems so important, but just remember, if you're telling a story that makes sense and that is rational, then it's okay if someone in the audience figures it out. It's okay if someone guesses it, because it means your story has a natural flow and that you've put clues, and that, obviously you don't want them to guess. Like, I watched the Pikachu movie and I guessed the ending 2 seconds in. That's bad. But just based on casting choices. But the Detective Pikachu movie, I was like, oh, Ryan Reynolds, that kid's dad. That's the story, right? They're just like, my girlfriend at the time looked at me like, did you just ruin this movie for me 2 seconds in? I was like, we'll see. And it turns out I did. But that's bad. But if they've watched 50% of your show and consumed 50 to 60% of your story, and they figure it out, then it means that you have built a world that makes sense. Your story's following a progression. It's not coming out of nowhere. And that person gets to feel good that they saw it coming. And that goes both for your players and your audience. So it's funny. I've had players guess things and they'll be like, no, don't say it, because then he'll change it. And the rage I feel at the suggestion that I would change it, because I'm pretty sure what they did on Battlestar Galactica. And I believe they changed it because people guessed the ending. And I freak out every time someone says I will do that, because I'm like, no, because I'm way better than that. I will not change the ending just because someone guessed it. No, our story will make sense and be consistent.
Yeah, sorry. I guess you almost want that kind of experience for a story where someone can guess it if they're paying very close attention.
Yeah, that's the reward,
Yeah. Or at least someone once you do the reveal is like, oh, that makes sense. At least that feeling.
And if they figure it out just moments before the reveal, especially if they figure it out, but it's too late to do anything about it, chef's kiss. Then everyone gets to enjoy watching the train crash. We all knew it was coming. We put the pieces together, but it's too late to stop it. Wonderful. Chef's kiss. Love it.
Yeah.
But hey, thank you again for having me on this. And if you ever want to talk again, let me know.
Yeah. No, this was wonderful. Thank you, George.
Thank you.
Hope you enjoyed that interview with George. Fears and Fortunes is on YouTube. There's a link in the episode description for that. And the Forgotten Adventures map assets are available online through their website or through their Patreon. And there's links to those as well. If you've enjoyed listening to this, you can join other fans on the Discord channel for Setting the Stage. You can find that in the episode description also. Everything's there. And if you want to be a guest, there's also a link there for you to be a guest. Fill out a survey, and we can get interview time scheduled for you. Thank you for listening, and as always, thank you to Darren, our Patreon supporter, for supporting the show. Thank you very much.